Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, episode 72, 3 Myths Keeping Your Sex Life Subpar. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. Well, hi, friends. Today we are going to dive into 3 myths that you probably heard growing up. And these myths may have been hurtful to you before you got married. And they are probably still hurtful to you, especially if you haven't started to do the work to work through these hurtful myths. Okay, so here are the 3 myths that we are going to talk about today. The first is this idea that sex is going to hurt the first time. And when we say sex, I think in this context, we usually mean intercourse. The second one is you should have sex to keep your husband happy. And the third is that if you didn't cover up your body, men may sin because of how you were dressed. And so today we are going to talk about why these messages were hurtful to you before you got married. And then we're going to talk about how they can still impact you in your relationship and hurt your marriage. Before jumping in, I just wanted to make sure that you knew about my new freebie I recently created. Your sex life has so much potential to bring healing, to bring power into your relationship. But the only way for it to do that is if sex is deeply connecting. And so I created a new freebie just for you to help you and your husband start to create the fulfilling and deeply connecting sex life that you deserve and that you desire. So go to ladiestalkinglove.com/connect and download my new freebie, Create a Deeply Connecting Sex Life, to help you and your spouse start to work through how you can create a deeply connecting sex life that binds you together, empowers you, and helps you receive the love and meaning that you want in your sex life. But without further ado, let's talk love. Let's dive into myth number 1, that sex would hurt the first time. Now, unfortunately, this may be a really common occurrence, even though it shouldn't be. A lot of us hear that sex will be painful the first time. And so instead of recognizing that if there is pain with intercourse, because a lot of us, when we hear sex will hurt the first time, what we're really hearing is intercourse will hurt the first time, is that we expect there to be pain. And so instead of recognizing if there's pain, there's something going on and there should not be pain, we push through it because we expect it to be normal. Now, as a side note, if you've been around here for a while, you know intercourse should never be painful. This can be common. 1 in 5 women, according to a great blog post from The Vagina Whisperer. She is a fantastic pelvic floor physical therapist, but she talks about in women's lifespan, about 1 in 5 women at some point in their life will experience pelvic pain. And this can be pain with intercourse. And some of the reasons are really simple to take care of. Maybe you're not using enough lubricant, or maybe you're not aroused enough. And that happens a lot, I think, for especially those of us who may have waited to have intercourse until we got married, is that we weren't aroused enough on our wedding night that sex could actually be painful because we didn't take the time and we thought that, oh, it's our wedding night. Now this means that intercourse is going to happen and we're going to jump into that instead of taking the time to figure out arousal and waiting until we were ready for intercourse. So let's talk about this, why this was hurtful. As you can expect, like I already said, you expected to have pain the first time that you had intercourse. This set you up for it to feel normal if you had pain, or to be grateful if there was an absence of pain. So at best, on your wedding night or when you first had intercourse, instead of thinking, oh, this is supposed to be good for me, you were expecting pain, or you were like, oh, I'm so glad that didn't hurt. Do you see the problem here? Since we didn't talk about pleasure, no one talked to you about like sex should actually be amazing for you. And we don't want to have intercourse until it is going to be good for you. And we're going to work on that. Intercourse does not have to happen on your wedding night. Instead, we expected it to, and we expected pain. This can create a pattern. We look for the absence of pain as a good thing in our sexual relationship instead of, from the very beginning, focusing on sex, on intercourse, especially we're talking about intercourse here, as a way that can be connecting and feel good, and that something that we actually desire and want because it's really connecting and feels good. Now, intercourse is not the only part of sex, but I do think it can be a really great part of a sexual encounter. But because of that, because of the focus on intercourse, because of this view of, oh, if I don't have pain, things must be good, we're missing out all of the pleasure, especially for women, that goes so far beyond intercourse. And for most women, intercourse isn't the most pleasurable part of sex because so much of this focus of our wedding night is talked about, oh, it's going to be painful. It's fine. Don't worry about it. There isn't a lot of talk about making sex good for you as the woman. We might push through pain. If you are pushing through pain, I want to tell you right now, please don't. Please stop pushing through the pain. It's just going to make it worse, and it's going to hurt your relationship. There's something really sad about thinking about your husband and thinking about being intimate with him and the way we can be closest with him and relating it to pain. That is not what we want. We want this experience to be about deep love and connection and something that is so binding for both of you. If this myth is still operating for you, and instead of focusing on your pleasure during sexual encounters, and you're focusing on, oh, I didn't feel pain, this must be okay, or it wasn't that enjoyable, but it wasn't painful, so we're good. I want you to start to shift that, to focus on sex as something that should be full of love, full of joy, full of something empowering, and full of pleasure for you. The second myth we're diving into is that you should have sex to keep your husband happy. This was commonly accepted for me growing up. It was commonly accepted that men like sex more than women. I heard comments from women that it only took a couple minutes. So after you get married, just have sex to keep him happy. The focus of sex was never about me as a woman. It was never about my pleasure. The focus of sex was that men like sex and to keep them happy, to help them stay emotionally connected, right? I hate when people say this, when people are like, women need connection and men need sex, right? This idea of like, men want this, women want this. I think that is completely bogus. We both, as men, as women, need both physical connection and emotional connection. And when I say physical connection, I'm not just talking about intercourse, about just sexual encounters, but all of us in healthy relationships, we need both of those things. And even though sex is not a need, I believe that in healthy relationships, sex is necessary to have the depth and deep love and connection that you can have. Without a great sex life, you can't access the deep connection and empowerment that you could have if you are not fostering a fantastic sex life as part of your relationship. So, because of this idea that it was my responsibility to keep my husband sexually fulfilled and to keep him happy so he doesn't get grumpy by having sex, the focus was always on making sure that I kept my husband sexually fulfilled. And you may have felt this because of this focus for women to fulfill the sexual quote unquote needs. It's not a physical need. Men do not physically need sex, but I do think it's a relational need. But because of this idea that it's a physical need and that it's our job to keep our husband sexually fulfilled, there was then this thought and this idea that if I didn't keep him happy, keep him sexually fulfilled, he may look elsewhere for that fulfillment. He may lash out, and it's not his fault because he's not getting the sex he needs, or he's unable to connect emotionally because he needs to connect physically first. All of these things are so hurtful to a relationship. And so sex became something that was constantly another way in my life to take care of someone in my family. I was taking care of my kids' needs. I was taking care of the needs of the house, of our food needs, of our clothing needs. And sex became a way for me to focus on my husband and make sure that his needs were met. And when I say this, I don't think he knew this was going on in my head. Because of socialization, because of what had been taught to me, this was how I viewed this relationship, even though this wasn't how he viewed it. And so it became a job. If we want sex to be a great part of our life, that's the most unsexy thing, to have it be a chore, a job, because that is going to tank desire right there. And you've heard things like, oh, you are such a lucky guy that you have a wife who wants sex. And we think men are always in the mood. And so it's about keeping him happy. And so this myth, this idea that sex was about my husband and that it was my job to fulfill his needs caused a lot of resentment. And I've seen this in other women too. It causes a lot of resentment if you are constantly fulfilling other people's needs. And I want you to know that's not what sex needs to be about. Sex can actually be something that empowers you as a woman, that is about you as a woman. It's a watering place for you and your spouse to connect, to find more energy, to feel empowered, to heal, to find peace. It is such a powerful aspect of a marriage relationship. And I believe that God created it that way. And when we believe this myth that sex is for our husband and that it's our job to have sex to keep him happy, we will never be able to start to unleash the power that can actually come to your relationship when we see sex as the way I believe God intended it to be, as a watering place for both of you. Okay, here we go. Number 3, you may have heard growing up, especially if you grew up in purity culture, with modesty culture, if you didn't cover up your body, you may be a stumbling block for men. You may cause men to sin because of the way you were dressed. This was hurtful to you before you got married, because what did it teach you? What did it teach you about men and their sexuality? I'll tell you some things it taught me, and I think that you're going to start to realize, oh, that's what I thought too. It taught me that men's desire for sex was uncontrollable. It taught me this myth that sex was a need because it was uncontrollable, and men would sin or act upon this desire if I didn't cover up my body. And so it was my job to keep them safe by the way I dressed before I got married. And this goes into what we talked about before. Then after I got married, it was my job to keep them sexually satisfied. But here was the problem with this myth, was that there was so much of a focus on how bodies looked as the instigator of men's sexual desire. And so if I dressed immodestly, there was also this underlying belief that men's sexual desire was only based on how bodies looked and if those bodies were attractive to them. That was what turned on men's sexual desire. And so when I went into my marriage with this belief from modesty culture that my body was what turned on men's sexual desire, it became really harmful as my body started to change. When I was pregnant, I thought there was no way my husband could be attracted to me and want to be sexually intimate with me because my body did not look attractive as I thought. And I missed this whole point because I was so focused on what modesty culture had taught me about my body being the instigator of men's attraction. And I don't want to discount that men can be visually stimulated and attracted by a woman's body. But I would also like to say that the focus is so much on that. Women are also attracted and can be attracted to men's bodies. But the focus was so much on men and being attracted to beautiful bodies that I watered down my husband's sexual attraction to only based on how my body looked. And so I missed his bids for deeper connection with me because if I was super sweaty because I hadn't, bathed in a day because I was taking care of my young baby and I was still in my pajamas and I was frazzled, I didn't believe that there was any way he would want to connect with me in an intimate way because of how I looked. This is such a shallow way to view men's sexual desire. And I want you to know that in a healthy relationship, men's sexual desire goes so much deeper than how your body looks. If you have a partner or if you know of someone who is only focused on how a body looks, that's unhealthy. That is not a good relationship because our desire to be intimate with someone that we care about and love goes so much deeper than how our body looks. And that myth that I needed to cover up for men that I learned as a youth, it hurt my marriage because I viewed my husband's sexual desire as only based on how I looked. And as I have reframed that, I have found that there are so much more deeper meanings of why I may choose to be intimate with my husband and why he may choose to want to be intimate with me. Because we care about each other, because we love each other, because we're proud of each other, because we're hurt and we want to get connected again, because we see them doing their thing and it's like, wow, I just love them. They are so awesome. And so when we believe these myths, these 3 myths that we covered today, that sex would hurt the first time, that it's your job to keep your husband happy and sexually fulfilled, and that if you didn't cover up your body, you may cause men to sin. These things can be hurtful before you become sexually active because of the beliefs they bring. And then after, those beliefs can stick around. Even in a healthy marriage where you have a spouse who loves you and wants to love you in a way that is deeply connecting and empowering for you, when you bring these myths into your relationship, it inhibits your ability to allow them to love you in the way they want to love you. It prevents you from feeling that love because when we believe these things, we can't accept that they would love you when you're in your jammies and looking rough because you've had a rough day. We can't believe that sex is for us because it's actually a job we're doing to keep them sexually satisfied. And I want you to be able to start to shift those myths because they will change your marriage and they will change your relationship. I've seen that in my own life and I've seen that in other women's lives as they've learned what myths exist and started to question them, because so many of these myths we don't even think to question because they are just accepted as fact. And so I am here to tell you that they are not fact. And I want you to be able to start to work through those myths that you might not even realize are operating in your relationship so that you can uncover the joy and fulfillment that you deserve in your sexual relationship with your husband, so that sex can be a source of power and strength and deep love for you and your relationship. If you're ready to start to dive in deeper, if you're ready to take the challenge and really work on this to make sex what you want it to be so that you can love your sexual relationship with your husband as much as you love your husband, you're ready for my course, From Pressure to Passion. That's where we dive in, we find what's holding you back, and I work with you to help empower you to create a sex life that you can love as much as you love your husband. Go to ladiestalkinglove.com/course, and there you'll find all the information about what each module's topic is we will cover during that course. And you can sign up for the waitlist right now. And in the next couple weeks, you will get a special discount code when my course goes live again to join at a special price just for those of you who took action early to join my waitlist. I'm so excited to have you in my course and to work with you to help you uncover the joy and fulfillment that you deserve in sex. As always, thanks for talking love. Thank you to all of you who listen and join me on this journey, and to our Ladies Talking Love team who make the podcast possible. Thanks to our sound wizard, Kimberly Demers, and our miscellaneous task whiz, Melissa Havertz.